Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an IIT grad who has turned to agriculture, Mr. Arpit Maheshwari from India. Arpit, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ashutosh.
Arpit, as I mentioned in the introduction, is an IITian turned natural farmer. So, Arpit, after a long stint in technology in USA, what made you come back to India?
My journey actually goes in multiple kind of directions. After I graduated from IIT Bombay, first actually I didn't even go into technology. It was more in the space of finance. I joined Goldman Sachs as a quant or as a strategist, as they call it there.
Right.
And I was working on a really interesting problem of how to use mathematical models to make the operations bit more efficient.
Wow.
Conventionally, strats or quants and Goldman have been really the ones sitting with the traders and building the pricing models. But our work was of the same nature, but in a very different domain. I did that for a few years and in fact led the Bangalore team very early on. But from then I moved on to the world of technology because something about startups was really more enticing than working in a very big bank. And I worked in a couple of startups. The last one was called HackerRank. It's growing still. It's one of the leading platforms for of a developer community and for hiring tech talent. And it's a very known brand today now. When I joined, it was a very, very small early stage startup back then. I also was a part of the HackerRank team in the US in 2015. But that is when I realized that although I love technology and I continue to be associated with it in limited capacity now, what I felt was missing was something around more holistic well-being in my life. The modern urban lifestyle, if I can say so, is very centered around a consumerist mindset. And that was very bothering to me personally. I felt that I was not prioritizing the right things by kind of focusing on a very hectic work life.
Right.
And being very disconnected with nature. That's something that I realized was something very personally important to me. So that's really when I decided to not continue in the US for a long time, or even in technology as a full-time career option for a long time, and decided to go a very alternative route.
Very interesting. And you also, write about the fact that, you went off on a sabbatical to South America.
I did, yes.
So tell me, what did that sabbatical teach you?
So the sabbatical is what my wife Sakshi and I needed to actually transition. It's just hard to completely transition into a very different world. And we didn't really know what is the transition we wanted to make. So we took a 1-year sabbatical, went to South America and traveled in a few countries. One of the important parts of this sabbatical was also we volunteered with government of Chile in an English teaching program. So we were actually teaching English to middle grade school kids.
Wow.
In government schools of Chile. And this, along with the kind of backpacking and the traveling bit which followed it in the other parts of South America, was a life-changing experience for me. One, I think I personally became much more aware of the gravity of how we have completely changed our environment, the significant habitat loss that has happened due to our kind of modernized activities is something that I was able to internalize only after actually going to the remotest parts of the Amazon rainforest and really seeing it in front of my eyes, right? The sabbatical also taught me one very important thing, which was that it is actually possible to slow down and live I would say, more decluttered life. I felt that while I was happy and kind of growing very comfortably in my career and learning a lot of new things, I just felt that there was also a lot of clutter always. And I think that one of the things that this South America bit taught me was that We were living in a small town for 6 months when we were teaching in our respective schools.
Right.
And this was a very different lifestyle from what we had lived since our childhood, because we were both
Correct.
city kids.
Mm.
Um, the other related bit with this is I realized that there's such an importance of connections to
Mm-hmm.
our well-being, and this
Mm.
happens at so many different levels. Uh, there's of course your family, which we all kind of obviously think of, and
Mm.
there's also kind of the outer circles of people with whom we share interests, like-minded folks,
Mm.
our local community, and the environment. Even if
Mm.
we go beyond people, I think there's just like so many connections which
Mm.
are a fundamental part to our well-being. And
Mm.
I felt that a work-centered life for me did not do the right justice
Mm.
in kind of balancing these different aspects.
Very
I had
true.
subconsciously put so many things on low priority, which I
Mm.
did not realize.
Mm. Mm.
And
Fascinating.
yeah, this was how the sabbatical was really a
Fantastic.
kind of life-changing experience for me.
Fantastic. And then you came back to India and
We
you
did, yes.
acquired a 1.5 acre farm. So tell
Yes.
me, what are you doing on the farm and how are you different from so many others?
Sure, there's so much talk about organic. You're right, Ashutosh.
Mm.
So we call the farm and entire initiative Jeevantika.
Mm.
Jeevantika actually means life promoting.
Mm.
We are based out. We also wanted a name which is locally relevant. The
Yeah.
city of Ujjain used to be called Avantika in the
Mm.
past. I don't know if many people know about it.
Mm.
We really wanted something which reflects our philosophy and also like physically where we are doing, because we wanted to be tightly connected to the local community, as I said. uh, our farming efforts or the land efforts are very centered around the concept of land regeneration. That is what I would say is the primary goal that we try to work on.
Okay.
uh, the idea is to build a healthy soil, because we feel that for a sustainable future, the
Mm.
very foundation or the basis is actually a healthy soil. And that is what we are missing with the modern agriculture primarily. We practice agroforestry on this 1.5 acres of land,
Mm.
and to try and build a rich and diverse ecosystem. So you asked actually how we are different from some of the other farms.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike many other farms, we don't actually produce for commercial selling. So we don't really sell our produce commercially. We
Okay.
rather use it for primarily our own sustenance,
Mm.
so feeding ourselves.
Mm.
And the other bit of the farm is we work on agrotourism.
Mm.
So we invite people to come and kind of stay on the farm,
Mm.
connect with Mother Earth, and I would say experience a healthy and sustainable lifestyle. It's there's a lot of talk going on, but I feel that unless you really experience that, how this is in so many ways different from our modern urban lifestyle, it's very hard for people to even make that small change. So
Right.
that is really what we focus on, and this is how we use most of our
Fantastic.
produce to sustain ourselves and our
Mm.
visitors.
Wonderful. And in your journey
Mhm.
from technology to agriculture,
Yeah.
what are some of the sustainability challenges you have faced?
Well, yes, it's definitely been not an easy ride. I would lie if I'm saying that. One of the big things is while we did our exploration, we had the sabbatical in that period of a year and a half to figure things out where we
Mm.
want to go.
Mm.
I think the biggest challenge really has been in this journey of lack of a support system, if I
Mm.
can say so. It's a very different world from where we come from. I
Mm.
think coming from the IITs and working in some of the best kind of companies across the
Mm.
globe, it was, I would say, relatively easy to have a support system, to find mentors, to just have so many people to discuss or brainstorm your ideas with. When we enter the world of sustainability, of course, there are some very great people working, but it's a very small group still. And I think for us, that finding out our own support system was, I would say, the biggest challenge.
Mm.
The
Mm.
other bit, which is slightly related, is we chose to do it in a small town. Um, I absolutely am an advocate that one can live a sustainable life even living in a city, and that's really what we promote with Jeevantika. We don't
Right.
actually ask people to like everybody just leave the city life and come to a small
Mm.
town, but we chose that for ourselves because for us that seemed to make sense.
Mm.
Uh, but having lived in like big cities and especially metro cities for the over a decade, coming to live in a kasbah, as we call it in India, right? Like a small town of 30,000 population.
Right.
Was a big cultural shock for us.
Mm.
And we knew what we were getting into,
Mm.
but it took some time to get our ways around it and kind of adapt, is what I would say.
Fascinating. And coming back to your farm, how are some of the modern day farming practices supporting sustainability in India that the other farms are not doing?
Sure, sure. So Ashutosh, I'll be honest here. I think most of the what we call as modern agriculture, right?
Mm.
The modern day farming practices are in many ways
Mm.
almost 180 degrees to the concept of sustainability, right? We're basically talking about industrial scale farming is what we are getting into. Maybe not as much in India as in the West, but we're getting there. And I think that's been really the radical shift since the Green Revolution happened.
Mm.
Uh, so most of the modern day farming is really based on the concept of over exploitation is what I have realized after kind of being in this
Correct.
space for so long. And the basic problem or the flaw, as the engineer in me, the basic flaw I find is we are not really sticking to the rules of nature.
Right.
By excessive use of chemicals or even the practice of monoculture. By monoculture, what we mean is like growing a single crop, typically a cash crop nowadays, over a huge span of land. That's what monoculture is. Or using hybrid or genetically modified seeds. These are kind of breaking the rules of nature when we do that. And there is obviously going to be a long-term price we'll have to pay for that. And we are already doing that in terms of the quality of the food, in terms of the health of the soil, and so many other things, including biodiversity.
Right.
At the same time, I think I don't look at the current day system as only that. While that is still the status quo, I think there are alternative methodologies coming up. And that is really what has motivated us and has been kind of our kind of support group. There is a revival of the idea of organic and natural farming in different parts of the country today. It goes by different, I would say, labels. We talk about zero budget natural farming in Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. There is biodynamic farming. So the same concept has different manifestations. But I think they are fundamentally challenging the industrial scale farming, the monoculture industrial scale farming, and helping us prepare to move to the next version, which is inevitable. We actually have to get there. There's no way around it.
Absolutely.
Is what I feel.
Absolutely. Well said. So, when people around you look at all the amazing work that you're doing, when farmers around you look at it, is there an urge or a desire to start implementing your best practices in their farms?
Yes and no. Yes, because they are obviously. I think most farmers, if you kind of travel to the rural India, they are always in need of something new, and that is also speaking of the kind of tragic situation they are in usually. So they are attracted by some of what we do, and the reason is because their current system is failing. So what they're doing is not working out, and every farmer realizes that. We saw the huge farmer protests a year and a half, right, since COVID started, when the farm bills came out. So the talk about farmer suicides has been going on for over a decade now. So the farmer of India, the average small to medium farmer of India today, I think, is in need of something new, something transformational.
Right.
At the same time, to be very honest about it, what I am doing is not sufficient. And what I mean by that is we need more policy level changes there. What Jeevantika and I and Sakshi have been trying to promote are the bottom up changes. We are really talking about like how individuals can kind of contribute towards a sustainable lifestyle, making better use of land practices and so on. But at the same time, I think an average farmer who's typically in debt and is very dependent on his next income, so they cannot have the long-term view the way I am privileged to have.
Right.
Is one of the reasons why they also are not completely able to follow. So some of the things they like is like how our practices are cost reducing. We try to try to get away with the chemicals in the heavy machinery.
Right.
We fundamentally try to reduce cost, which is important to work out the unit economics.
Mm.
At the same time, to boost these regenerative practices, you need a policy level support. It's hard for an average farmer to get through without it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. My next question to you is again coming back to sustainability.
Okay.
You've seen Chile, where I'm told people are very conscious. You've seen different parts of South America where people seem to be much more conscious. What are some of the challenges that you see being faced in India on sustainability? And is the government and the corporate sector serious about it?
Okay, so there are obviously general sustainability challenges we face as a global community, right? Yeah. But when I think in context of India, one of the things that's been a dilemma behind the radar always is we are still a developing nation, right? Unlike Chile, as you took an example, which is a developed country with probably over 95% urbanization and so on. So most of the West, if you compare to India, has kind of gone past that initial phase of transitioning from developing to a developed country. And if you look at, not everybody is kind of doing a great job, but I really am a fan of some of the initiatives by the Scandinavian countries who have done an amazing job of prioritizing sustainability, right? We today, where we stand in the trajectory of development, I think it always will face this dilemma of whether we just focus all our energy of first becoming a developed nation versus thinking about sustainability. And that's a very basic dilemma, I think, that always underlines when you look at our kind of political agenda and other kind of social priorities. This is obviously there. Other than that, I think in context of India, one thing I mentioned earlier is like how farming is a very challenging activity, because I think the average landholding in India is very small.
Right.
So it was actually funny to me when people in the US say that a 70 or 80 acre farm is a small farm. That's not the case in India. Absolutely. We talk about a 1 acre or like 1.5 acre farm as a small farm. Right?
Correct.
So due to the average landholding, the farming as a profession or an economic activity is extremely challenging. And what doesn't make it simple is like how we are already taken away with the wave of climate change and market fluctuations, right? The other bit, which is I would say more contextual in India, is our youth, like how significant percent of our population is so young. But I think we are missing a very broader framework of educating or creating awareness about environment, right? It has to be in context of Indian youth, and I think that is missing, and it's a very big challenge that we face today. How we can just kind of, so there's obviously like the youth worrying about employment and social security and all of that, but how at the same time we can educate them so we can go towards a more holistic development. We don't have to choose between becoming a developed nation and being sustainable, how we can actually do both. And I think education lies at the very base of it. It's very important to start early on.
Correct. Well said. Arpit, my last question to you now, and this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing journey, as an IIT grad, worked in the US in technology, went off on a sabbatical, decided to give it all up and come back and become a farmer. And hopefully are now going to be sharing all your good best practices with many more people. What would you say are 3 lessons you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from our conversation?
Sure. I think personally, one of the life lessons, I can only share what I actually think of as a lesson for myself.
Correct.
And I think one of the basic lessons for me was how to become aware of what truly contributes to my well-being, right? So there is a life on an autopilot mode, right? And that's how most of us live most of the time. But taking that small amount of time to challenge it or to question our norms, our own very thought process. I'm not even talking about questioning the society, just questioning
Correct.
our own notions, and developing that deeper insight into what does and does not contribute to our well-being. I think is one of the biggest things that I continue to practice. I think I've made some headway there, but there's still a lot to be done. The other lesson is really kind of ingrained in nature. I would say that it really changed my perspective that instead of thinking of us human beings as kind of at the center stage of this drama going on, where we are kind of the conductors, I think we have lost the sense that we are also a part of it. When even like in our conversation, we think of nature as the plants and animals outside of us, and we think of ourselves as something else, right?
Right.
And we think we have to save nature or we have to fix nature. I think that's really a view that has changed in my head over time. How we actually are nothing but a part of it. Of course, we are the smartest species out there. There's no doubt about it, and there are ways in which we can change the trajectory of this planet and life itself in ways that has never been done before. But at the same time, there are still some very basic laws, just like there are laws of physics. There are some basic laws of nature which we have to respect. And rather than taking the seat of masters, we are better suited to take the more modest seats of stewards. We are more like stewards of this kind of drama, the way I see it. The other thing, I would say a lesson which is based on one of the biggest mistakes I made is thinking that I'm alone. So when you choose an alternative path, right, it's very easy to, so there is a need for conviction, and that is possible when you kind of think things through and are very clear in your head. But I think apart from just your own conviction, you also need a tribe. For the first couple of years when I went on this journey, I think I was missing the tribe, and I had this in my head that I'm going to just figure it out all by myself. But that's not how we function. I think the lesson for me is like I always have to find a tribe. My interests and priorities and the trajectory may evolve, and I might have to evolve my tribe, but I'm always going to need them, right? So it may not exactly be the friends or the colleagues I was with in Bangalore or the US, right? But today I have a different set of very close friends, or kind of, I would say, partners in crime with whom I function on a daily basis. And that is really needed to just have a very healthy emotional and mental setting in general, I think.
Amazing. Arpit, on that note, and your 3 lessons, which has become aware of what truly contributes to our life. We are a part of nature, and we are not alone, and find people who will support you because that support system is necessary. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your incredible journey and all the amazing work that you are doing for sustainability and in your own farm. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thanks a lot, Ashutosh. And I'm glad to be a part of TBCY. It's an amazing effort, I think. And I'm happy that this helps me to kind of get the word out on our initiative here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.